What is up guys, how you doing? It is Sunday the 28th of May and this is your tech news roundup. Now before we get into the news for this week, I actually want to show you a clip. This was from what would have been last week's episode if it had actually happened. Unfortunately I didn't get to film the whole thing and I was just too busy, and I also couldn't do the tech week ahead with all of the interviews and all of the stuff from UC Expo. I just didn't have the time. However, I did film one story and it is still kind of relevant because it's still kind of going on. However, just take a look and I'll be back here with this week's news in like 3 minutes. I want to start off by continuing coverage of a story we first covered last week, which, as promised, is Wanna Decryptor. From a ransomware point of view, very little has changed. Surprisingly, fewer machines were affected than expected come Monday morning, which is great news. But outside of that, it's kind of, it's as expected. As expected, there's a version of a ransomware that doesn't ping the domain to make sure it's not live before installing itself. But, whatever. The major thing from that entire situation is still screw the NSA for hiding, for who knows how long they had it. This is a vulnerability that's existed since Windows XP. It wasn't patched until Windows 10. It's now being patched through all versions of Windows all the way back to XP. But, seriously? The NSA has a responsibility to report these to Microsoft, not because it's what's best for them, because Microsoft would patch it, but because it's what's best for the people. This right here is an example of why you can't have a bunch of tools and a bunch of exploits, or even a backdoor, because someone will hack your server. Someone will get into the NSA, regardless of how secure they think they are, and steal all of your tools. And once the tools were stolen, it was as simple as just putting some ransomware behind it and being good to go. The real reason I want to cover this though isn't because of the technical side, because the technical side is relatively unchanged. It's mostly as expected. The reason I want to cover it is the personal side. You see, last week I mentioned a Malware-Tech blog, the security researcher who completely accidentally stumbled upon the domain and then registered it, and it just happened to stop the spread. The guy had no idea what it would do. That's what happened. Great. And you'd think the story would end there for our hero, right? But god damn it, I'm just Malware-Tech, if you're watching this, I just want you to know that I am sorry on behalf of the idiots who did this. If you're not aware, we think it's the Daily Telegraph. Judging by the times the articles were published, they seem to have been the first ones on it. But a journalist doxed Malware-Tech blog, or the guy who runs the Malware-Tech Twitter. Now when I say doxed, I don't mean they said his name and left it at that. This is a guy who didn't want to be found. That was very clear. If you look at his Twitter, it's a random image, and it's whatever. It's someone who doesn't want to be identified. But journalists, being journalists, went in, scoured the internet for everything, and even went as far as identifying people in a picture that he's known to be in, finding that person and turning up to their doorstep to identify the person in the photo. As I said, it's thought the Daily Telegraph was the first ones to get their hands on this information, and it wasn't just his name, it was his name, his address, and interestingly, his love of pizza? That's right, if you look at the article, which I'm not linking to because I do not condone this even remotely, in fact it is bloody irresponsible and just f***ing stupid. If you look at this article, they spend a good, paragraph or two just talking about this guy's love of pizza. I'm sorry, but this guy's a hero right now, right? This is a guy who literally stopped a massive ransomware attack by complete accident, but did it nonetheless. And you guys have just gone and leaked all his information on the internet. This guy literally has to move, and if you look on his Twitter, you can see the the fallout from it. But it's such a big deal. And then companies like the Wall Street Journal and the Daily Telegraph wonder why trust in traditional media is at an all-time low, when the Wall Street Journal came out talking about how PewDiePie was a Nazi, and they've gone and doxed Malware-Tech. And this is why. You guys are all idiots. You're completely out of touch. And you guys have just doxed someone who potentially made some really powerful enemies. I mean, let's be real. The chances of the people being behind WannaCry being a large crime organization is remote at best. But, if this is a major deal, I'd be very concerned for his safety. So here's the deal. If you're from the Daily Telegraph or one of the 4 or 5 other publications, The Sun, who else was it? The Sun, The Mirror and the Daily Mail, who also published this information the moment they got their hands on it, I just want to... Can we, like, just talk for, like, a second? Just want to, just want to talk. If you're from one of those publications, or if you even have, like, even the slightest bit to do with that information going out in the public, fuck you. Now, I don't swear a lot. I don't take lightly to swearing. If you watch, like, you could watch all over 200 of the Snappy-Tech videos, and I probably haven't sworn in any of them, but this is a really major deal, because, like, what the hell, guys? Back on the topic of wanting to crypto really quickly before we move on to the next topic, I was just scrolling through Reddit, and it turns out, and this is very last second, turns out that it has actually been found out that 98% or over 98% of computers that were affected were running Windows 7, so upgrade your Windows! If you can, of course. There are people who can't, and there are situations where you can't, such as the NHS because of the medical equipment and the drivers required behind it, but if you can, please just stay up to date. And also, there's been a WannaCry ransomware decryption tool released, a decryptor. This tool lets you unlock files that have been encrypted without having to pay the ransom. There's a link to this in the description because, this is a good thing. So, link in the description, so go check that out if you are affected. But yeah, which is great news. It is worth mentioning that the guy behind Malware Blog did speak to the Associated Press, and that apparently got most of the press off his back because there wasn't a story there anymore, which is great for him. Anyway, let's move on to news that's from this week. First up in news that happened just yesterday, British Airways had a really tough day. In the morning, reports were coming in that flights were delayed due to a computer glitch, which only got worse. In fact, in the morning they said they were just delayed. By the afternoon they said that all flights up till 7 PM from London Gatwick and London Heathrow Airport had been cancelled, and then later in the evening they said that all flights were cancelled. Reports have come in from both Gatwick and London Heathrow to say that the airports have been absolutely hectic, as you'd expect, with thousands of passengers descending on the airports just to find out their flights aren't running. However, that's not where it's worst. Where it's worst is that the issue was with the planes not knowing who to let on the plane. The manifests for the luggage and the passengers weren't being created, and they meant they didn't know who went on what plane, and it also meant that they couldn't move the planes. Since all planes don't take off at the same time, planes that already had people in it and were already in the air were fine. Flights that were going to London Gatwick, for example, would land and then had nowhere to go. But planes that were at the gate were at the gate. They couldn't be moved because they were expecting to put passengers on it and they weren't sure how long that glitch was going to last. So the people on the planes would just be circling around for hours. The CEO of British Airways, Alex Cruz, did state that there doesn't seem to have been a cyber attack. They actually said that they believe the issue was some kind of power supply issue, which sounds really bizarre. The exact line was, and I quote, "We believe the root cause was a power supply issue." Like, what? Is your entire fleet powered off one power supply? Is that how, like, we need some redundancy here, guys. Potentially one of the worst parts about this is the timing. You see, next week there's a bank holiday on Monday, or tomorrow is a bank holiday, meaning a lot of places, a lot of kids and a lot of families are leaving for long weekend trips. So from Friday till Monday, so they get that sort of extra time away. And with kids also having half term, most under 16-year-olds are off school next week, so they might just be taking weeks abroad. British Airways have stated they are more than happy to either reschedule or refund all flights depending on whether it's a business trip and you can reschedule, or it was a holiday and you require a refund. But this does make me question the redundancy of British Airways' system, because is there none? Like, if one power supply goes down, are they screwed? Like, surely if nothing else, they should have an entire backup system, right? Like, when when WannaCry happened, the NHS had an old paper-based system that they then used, and although that might not be practical, surely there should be a separate, like, computer system that, oh no, primary is down, let's go into secondary. But hey, I'm sure British Airways will get past this, and they'll find a way to make sure it never happens ever again, and that is very important if you're British Airways, especially because you're in the public light all the time, and this isn't a good mistake to make. The biggest mistake is probably the shoddy communication. Like, no one was told what was going on. A lot of people, their first way of realising that their flights had been delayed was looking at the BBC News app and having that sort of little notification that's like, breaking news, all flights are cancelled, and we're like, wait, what? But as I said, this is a big learning experience. Elsewhere, Uber has gotten creepy. And creepy is a gross understatement. Now, the reason this happened is that Uber drivers found that the difference between what they were being paid and what the rider was paying was massive, and they complained to Uber and went, guys, what's going on? Surprise, surprise, Uber's reply wasn't, we're just underpaying you, keep working. No, their reply was actually, we're implementing a new system, allow me to explain. That's my Uber PA person voice. Basically, Uber have implemented a new system for figuring out how much fares should cost, so instead of their current calculation, or their previous calculation, I guess, which, how that works, if you're not aware, is distance and time, and it does a weird calculation of the two numbers, and it gives you the price. Instead of that, which is a fairly reasonable system, if you ask me, they've used an AI. How have they used an AI? That's a great question. Where are you coming up with all of these questions? The AI will take in factors such as where you're travelling from, where you're travelling to, and things in between, who knows what those things in between are, and it will guesstimate how much it thinks you're willing to pay. What that basically means is if Uber's AI goes, wait a second, George is going from one rich person place to another rich person place, they're probably willing to pay more for an Uber, it will charge me more. It's yet to be seen how these factors work, and what it does take into account, is it just location? Is it peak time? And if there's a tube strike, for example, like, how does it do it? And it's it's like a teeny tiny bit creepy. And the reason this route-based pricing is so interesting is that drivers aren't in on it yet. If you're a driver, then you still get paid with the old system, which is distance and time with some form of equation. However, as part of this, they did also say that in a move to help with transparency, as well as telling drivers what they're being paid, they will also state what passengers are paying, which is great until, like, you know, you're like, why don't you pay me more, Uber? Why don't you pay me more, Uber? And is it just me, or is this just, like, a really shady thing to do? Like, surely if I'm travelling the same distance, but in two different locations, and it takes the same amount of time, it should cost the same. Like, I just don't see this. Like, maybe country to country might make more sense due to different currencies and different tax rates and all of that. That makes sense. But whether it's here or 2 streets down shouldn't make a difference. And finally, can we talk about Bitcoin for a second? Bitcoin hit an all-time high in value at an amazing $2,700 to one Bitcoin earlier this week, which is a record, and is an amazing record considering if you were in at Bitcoin at sort of when it first became a thing and had roughly $1 worth of Bitcoin, you'd now have many, many millions. But as you'd expect, and as what happens with most commodities and stocks and shares as well, it hit that all-time high and then it came crashing down. It dropped to as low as 1,700, which is a major drop, and then it slowly recovered. It's actually currently at just under 2,050, which is, you know, still strong. And the big issue with Bitcoin for most people is that it's not a physical currency. It's that you have a digital wallet and it's digitally encrypted, and if you lose the password, you lose the wallet and everything that's inside it. And we found that, like, you know, years ago there was a person who was digging through some trash because he had Bitcoin on an old hard drive, threw out the hard drive because he upgraded it, and then found out how much the Bitcoin on the hard drive was worth, and was literally digging through a landfill. Actually, that makes me wonder, did he ever find his hard drive? I'm not actually sure. Let me find out. So I just looked it up. Back in November of 2013, an IT guy chucked away a hard drive with roughly 7,500 bitcoins on it, which is now worth about 15 million US dollars, and was digging through a landfill for it. I couldn't find out if he ever found it. I doubt it, judging by the fact that it was never mentioned that he did find it. So, oops. But yeah, the thing that seems to be driving this growth is China. There's speculation that it's becoming a big deal in China, and as with most stocks of companies, speculation leads to people putting money in the hopes that something does happen, and we still haven't had anything apart from speculation, so there's been that sort of dip in confidence. Outside of that, the Japanese government last month recognised the cryptocurrency as an actual currency and saying that they also are willing to work with, which is a big step forward for the Bitcoin. And the huge Asian demand is just great news for anyone who is currently holding onto Bitcoin. But I mean, as a non-trader, this is probably horrible advice. I don't know. I don't trade. I would recommend getting rid of your Bitcoin currently because it's on the decline. But again, don't listen to me. If you lose money on this, that is totally not my fault. If you make money on this, get in touch. I want some of it. It was completely my call. Anyway guys, I hope you liked this video. If you didn't, I'm not quite sure what you're doing here. However, there is good news. You can click here to see the previous video, and you can click here to see a playlist. This playlist is our UC Expo 2017 coverage. We filmed 9 videos, over an hour's worth of content. It's all really great. Check that out. If neither of those fit for you though, click here to subscribe, where the future videos are great. So go do that, and I'll see you guys next time.